I've always been one to take action. At a young age, I would act on every fleeting thought. And by the time I was 19, I decided to move to Arizona with $100 to my name and no job. The planning was not my thing. In Arizona, I got hired at a manufacturing plant. And after working really hard and getting recognized for my leadership abilities, I decided to apply for a supervisor position on a dare. Yeah, a dare. I was 19 years old and I was working graveyard shift with my very favorite coworker, Chris. And everybody kept coming up and saying, hey, are you going to apply for that new supervisor position? And I remember thinking, man, everybody keeps asking me that. Maybe I'm qualified. Maybe I should apply. And I had just cracked open my Mountain Dew when the 8th person approached and said, hey, are you going to apply for that supervisor position? To which my friend Chris said, oh no, she doesn't have the testicles to apply. Every cell in my body lit up and I thought, game on. So I gulped that last sip of that dew and I tilted my head and I said, you know what, you're right. I don't have the testicles. I have the breasticles. A roar of laughter erupted, kind of like that. And then 15 people got up and followed me to that job posting where I applied for that interview. 5 days after my interview, my jaw hit the floor when HR called me and said I got the job. I remember thinking, man, I better get serious if I want to be successful. And then I spent 10 years. The first 10 years in corporate America following the same cycle. Work so hard that everybody noticed. Get offered an opportunity to take on a new challenge, take that challenge despite not feeling ready, and then figure it out as I go. I was the epitome of fire, ready, aim. Yeah? It wasn't until I was a senior executive in corporate America when I realized and recognized the importance of having a plan. In fact, I invested a lot of time and money to acquire the skills needed to cast a vision, develop a strategy, build an implementation plan, and then create a playbook just in case something went wrong. I had a bunch of contingencies. And working really hard to acquire those skills made me unstoppable. Over several more years, for 12 more years, I continued to progress. And I opened 2 new distribution centers. I conducted performance turnarounds for 3 businesses. And I implemented an international transportation strategy. With a healthy list of accomplishments, I felt pretty good about myself when I decided to take the leap and become an entrepreneur. I mean, I pretty much had all of my poop in one sock. It's just my PG way of saying I had my shit together. I became an entrepreneur in real estate. Flipping homes specifically, with this burning desire to buy and hold properties for long-term wealth. My business partner kept telling me, no, that's not realistic. The numbers don't work out. And I thought, okay, well, she's been in this business for 10 years. I'm going to go ahead and let her lead on this. And I did, and she taught me many things. And I had many, many rapid realizations about what it took to run my own business versus somebody else's business. Right? There's no corporate strategy that just fell into my lap anymore, where all I was responsible for was executing it within my 4 walls. It was no longer that easy. I was now responsible for determining where we would invest, how, and with whom. And even though I had been accustomed to somebody coming to my office and changing the toner in my printer for me for the better part of 2 decades, I now had to figure out my own technical issues. I couldn't just call the help desk. And technology is not where I shine. And just as I got comfortable with that, it became painfully obvious I no longer had paid employees working for me that were incentivized to do what I needed. I was working with realtors. I was working with contractors, inspectors, lenders, title companies, all independent of each other, all of them with their own agenda, and none of them with the same sense of urgency that I had or needed of them. And as frustrating as that was, I still had 2 things going for me, right? I had my business partner. She was one of the top trainers for real estate in the entire country, and she definitely had all her shit together. 2, my work ethic and ability to learn as I go had never failed me, so I was feeling really, really confident. And then it happened. I'll never forget the day I got my first offer accepted. I was sitting at Playtown, working on my laptop with my kids in the background playing. Now, anyone who has kids knows that when they play for a long enough period of time, they tend to smell like parks and recreation. So there I was, laptopping and momming with the waft of parks and recreation coming by when my phone went off, and it was a text message from the realtor, and it said, "Your offer was accepted. You're under contract." And I was like, yeah. And then it started to sink in, and I started thinking, man, there's a lot on the line. I better get a plan. So I approached that first property with my same old strategy and implementation plan, plus a pretty little list of everything that could go wrong, which included everything, except how to handle a faulty post and pier foundation, because I didn't know what I didn't know. But that first property taught me a lot about what I didn't know. And I spent several more years flipping properties and learning more lessons. And I still had that burning desire to do buy and hold properties. So I thought, it's time to get my business partner on board. She still had PTSD from the 2008 market crash. So I conducted an analysis, and I determined, well, actually, if we did enough flips and the right mix with the rentals, we could withstand a market correction. And after sharing that vantage point with her, I convinced her that we could implement a more viable strategy this time. So we did some homework in the area, and we found an area that had a lot of upside due to gentrification. And with my business partner on board, the excitement grew, and I unleashed a beast. Within the span of a couple of months, we had a proven team in place, and we closed on 4 duplexes and 7 flips. Yeah. We renovated the 4 duplexes, rented them, got a property manager in place, had 8 rents coming in. We even sold 2 of the 7 flips. Like, business was going really well. Plus, I had just got married. We took our honeymoon in Hawaii, and Oahu specifically, and we actually rented mopeds and rode them around the perimeter of Oahu. Like, life was awesome. It was great. And then this shift happened. We found out there were so many investors that were onto our hot little pocket of gentrification. We found ourselves in a saturated market that was full of investors. And construction labor was in high demand. And what happens when demand goes up? The prices. We all know that. So it got to the point where my construction guy was like, yeah, I don't have enough labor to cover your projects. Great. So facing that situation, I thought, man, I got to know the play here. What's the play? Well, I have to sell 2 of the properties as is. I went to my playbook. Sell 2 of the properties as is. Perfect. What else can I do? Because I have 5 other properties that I have to handle. And I went through that process and determined, all right, I'm cool. I have my plan B. I'm feeling great. I know I'm going to sell those 2 as is, listed them. And then I ran into my next hurdle. Out of nowhere, the lender called the note due on one of those properties that I listed as is. And after a 1-hour phone call, he informed me that I had 7 days to pay the property off or sell it. And if I didn't, he was going to put it into foreclosure. 7 days. And I asked him, with my jaw on the floor, how is that even possible, given that I've made every payment on time? He continued to explain, you changed the scope of work, and now the loan is in default. Now, there's only one play in response to that phone call. And that play was to go all in, fight or flight. I was on death ground with my back against the wall, and there's only one way out. And with 4 kids to feed and potential financial devastation looming in the background, plus this aggressive asset manager, I stood to lose $2 million in assets and face bankruptcy. And as I stood there in the kitchen, on the phone, that gut-wrenching nausea in the pit of my stomach, my 4 kids running around, their laughter in the background, completely oblivious, and the smell of spaghetti cooking on the stove, I knew the play. And it was next to impossible. So I hung up that phone, and I decided it's time for plan C, which was self-preservation mode. Now, self-preservation mode meant I needed to go and protect the investments. But in order to protect those investments, I had to do something that was incredibly monumental. I had to find a lender that would wrap all of those properties into one single portfolio loan. Yeah. And I had to do this before that aggressive asset manager put me into foreclosure, which would ruin my only chances of protecting the investments. So it was time. Right? I ended up going through this process. And I thought, you know what? My entire 22-year career in corporate America prepared me for this moment. I thought, you know, there's so much on the line. I've never been in the business of losing money. I looked at those plays. It became painfully obvious that 2 properties were not going to be ready in time for that portfolio loan. And that killed me because it crunched my timeline. And I knew I was going to have to sell them at a loss. I've never been in the business of stepping over a quarter to pick up a dime. So it was a no-brainer. I was going to sell them at a loss. I wasn't going to choose winning one battle when I was 3 feet from winning the war. So I'm happy to report I found a lender. And I got approved for that portfolio loan. Here's the best part. I closed on that portfolio loan 2 days before that jerk for the lender tried to put me in foreclosures. 2 days. Yeah. 2 days before. Now, when we closed and I realized that we were in the clear, I just sat there and cried. I got in tears due to a combination of joy, disbelief, and pure exhaustion. It was like I had been laying on the battlefield, victorious, yet unable to move because I had given it everything I had, right? And I took that week to reflect on everything that happened. And I realized, you know, if I didn't have a strategy, if I didn't have an implementation plan, and if I didn't have a playbook, I could have panicked in the face of all of that adversity and lost everything. $2 million worth of assets. And I thought, what a lesson, what a blessing, right? And now I tell all of my clients, in order to know the play, you have got to cast that vision, develop that plan. But you really got to get that contingency playbook together so that you know that play. And one of the biggest things that I learned was you have to be fluid, you have to be flexible, you have to change when you're facing new circumstances. Most importantly, you have to know when to make a sacrifice in order to win the greater goal, in order to win the war. So tonight, as each of you leave here, I encourage you, as you head home and you get home, I want you to grab your sock and get your shit together. Thank you. Thank you.